Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. This is episode 370. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, everybody. We all made it through Election Day yesterday. Big, massive turnout here in Virginia. Yeah, I was thinking about, I went to vote. There were six election workers there. And there was one other person in there voting when I voted. And, it was a Republican only primary. Only thing on the ballot was selecting the Republican Senate candidate here in Virginia to go against Mark Warner. And I bet the turnout was less than 5%. It's like, no one knows who the candidates are. The guy, Mississauga or something, won. But, no one knows who these people are, and none of them have a chance against Warner, who's really not a very strong, person in there, but, is a takedownable guy. But it's like the very few people in Virginia who have the name recognition, fundraising ability to challenge him, none of them chose to do so.
This is a problem for the Republicans across the country, is that there are plenty of high name recognition people who've served, in various positions, governor or whatever, that could run for Senate seats and whatnot, and they choose not to run. And so the Republican Party winds up with lesser known, if not completely unknown candidates, which makes the races unwinnable in effect, and pretty much hands the seats to the Democrats. Because there are plenty. You and I both know, just like you said with Warren. There are plenty of Democrats that are beatable, but the Republicans don't put up the good candidates against those beatable candidates all the time. So it's unfortunate. The only way, Virginia are beginning to wonder. It's like Maryland. The opportunities are when a senator steps down and you're kind of starting a little bit from ground zero. The power of the incumbency is not there. So you have a little bit more of an even field, kind of a thing, going in. But Republicans, many prominent Republicans have turned down opportunities to run all across the country. We would have several more Republicans in the Senate if those people had run, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely some candidates, some people who could have gotten in Virginia that didn't for whatever reason. And, I get it. Like, he's been there. He said he would only run for 2 terms. He's now running for his 4th, Warner. He also appears, it looks like he's back on the cocaine. If you see him, he's all bloodshot eyes and everything, which he's had problems with that before. So it wouldn't be shocking if he was, right. And he's tied to some of the weakest, most criminal stuff that's gone on up there. He could be picked apart, and he could be forced to debate. He could be forced to defend all this, Democrat socialist stuff that he hasn't disavowed them. So he could either defend them or disavow them. It wouldn't really matter. It would hurt either way. Right. But no one is, the guy who won is not going to even be able to get Warner to debate him because, he doesn't have to, and he won't.
Yeah, if you're gonna win comfortably, there's really not much of a reason to do this. This happens on both sides. You can, and then the other side can always say, "Well, you're afraid to do it," but it's like, why do I need to do this if I'm going to beat you 60-40 or better?
Right.
I'm going to coast anyway. People know who I am. The people who are going to vote for me know who I am, or at least they're going to just pull the lever, in essence, for the D. So, there's nothing I gain by debating a lesser known, unknown candidate at all, especially when they may have to wind up resorting to some kind of ambush or squirrely kind of tactic to try to get some headline grabbing thing that just, won't make any sense and won't really have any bearing on the race.
You're throwing long bombs. That's what,
that's right.
But here's the thing about it. So Virginia has some of the reddest counties in the country. They have some counties where it's literally 90% red. In the last election, the Republicans actually picked up a seat in the state Senate. So in the state Senate, it's 40 members. It's 21 to 19 Democrat. The state House is 51 to 49 Democrat. So it's not like Maryland where it's, you have almost veto proof majorities of Democrats, right? In both houses, you have, it's a very, very close state. And you have a lot of government workers, and they're kind of split. You think about them as being on the left because their jobs depend on there being a lot of government money, but a lot of this is like military, where that's not so much a factor. It's not like you're going, hat in hand, are we going to fund the military? Yeah, we're going to fund the military. So it's not undoable, right? We just had a Republican governor. The governor before the current governor was Republican, and not a bashful Republican either, a strong Republican. But it's not. There's no one organizing it. It's no one. We need to figure out like who is the best person in the country at leading a state party organization, and we need to hire that person and bring them here. Right, and whatever costs, it's worth it, because you're getting nothing out of it now, and you have very little and declining amounts of name recognition. Right now, so far it looks like that Virginia 2, which is one of the Dems' big targets this year, that's the Virginia Beach district, and the Republican who was thought to be in trouble, has pulled ahead, has taken a pretty good lead there. So, it's not that the state has turned against Republicans. It's that the Democrats are organized and into it and ready and have people in all these positions, and the Republicans don't. It was a big goal of the party in the last cycle just to have a candidate in every race. We're like, no more forfeits. We're going to put somebody up, however ridiculous they may be, and you're not going to get a forfeit, right? And I think they came pretty close, didn't quite do it. But you're battling just to put a name on the ballot, let alone someone who anyone's ever heard of or could win. And to still be very, very close to half. To me, it's like it's a winnable deal, but it's just not. It's not organized vigorously and forward-thinkingly enough.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I mean, so you have Virginia. I mean, the legislature was Republican controlled, and then they lost control. Which is their own fault. I don't know whether or not it's really they got a little bit too fat and happy, thinking that this would never happen, or they got outmaneuvered by the Democrats.
They got outworked. They got outworked is what happened. And the other thing is like the part of the state between here and Richmond turned sharply left. And, you put like a line through, a thick line through Virginia from here to Richmond. You're talking, Fredericksburg area, Culpeper, all that is turned to the left more than it was ever was before. It looks like a Republican will still win, like Virginia 7, which is kind of the western half of that area. But the eastern half is now, Prince William, Stafford, all that is, they're winning elections there, even with like kooky candidates.
So you need more Mormons, since they're mostly overwhelmingly conservative, to move into those areas. When you look at kind of the membership growth of the church. Overall, I mean, Virginia does far better than Maryland does, with Latter-day Saints, and so there's just not enough of them in number to overcome, this leftward turn that's going on. And Youngkin, I mean, he would have been a really good candidate. He would have been a formidable candidate. I think he was pretty popular, right? I mean, right. I think so he would have been a good candidate to run against Warner. I think that would have put Warner right back on his heels if he had run. And so, this is an opportunity that was lost for the Republicans, and that they couldn't convince Youngkin that he should run in this case. I mean,
Yeah.
at least Larry Hogan ran finally, in Maryland, but he was going to face an uphill climb because, the way Maryland is structured and everything like that, it's pretty tough. But he did, considering how Republicans generally do. I thought he did pretty well overall, and I think he showed this, like, you're going to need that more moderate type candidate that can kind of really reach across the aisle to try to make some headway into Maryland. Maryland is so overwhelmingly, Democrat liberal, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, but you turn off voters with that too. Because they say there's really no one there for me.
Yeah, but I mean, this has been, see, this is the problem.
Yeah,
I think,
it's like, how do you measure that? And so he ends up losing. Here's the guy who was a 2-term governor, right? And he was serving Congress. You couldn't do any more in the name of name recognition and electability among Marylanders, and he loses to somebody who's very little known about her outside of her own county, right? I mean, really not a strong candidate at all, and he got whipped pretty good. So, there are people in Maryland who vigorously support Trump, right? Obviously, there's a political phalanx of people there, and it's not big enough to win elections, but I think anti-Trump can't win elections either.
Right. I mean,
I think you got to negotiate it some third way.
Yeah, it's Hogan found that it was much more difficult being the anti-Trump senatorial candidate than the anti-Trump governor. Different level, different kind of reaction for people. The Democratic machine is very strong. Yeah, I mean, Angela Alsobrooks, not a great candidate, but the overwhelming numbers of Democrats in the state, that's all they really needed. And unlike when Hogan sailed into office in his first term as governor, where he pounded away about all the tax increases that O'Malley and fees that O'Malley had raised during his time in office, that's not a Senate issue, really. That's a state governor issue, a state race issue, not a national issue there. So he couldn't, you couldn't really use that. I mean, and Wes Moore's been a terrible governor, but he needs to. What's he going to do? He's caught between that whole thing of, like, I've already distanced myself from Trump. I can't hook myself to him because I've already gone against him. I could pick up some votes potentially from the MAGA crowd that's left in Maryland, but then I guess I alienate some of the others. It's kind of tiptoeing a fine line in Maryland. This has been a problem. I mean, I still think about when Hogan won his first term. When I was on the Central Committee in Montgomery County, the wonderful feeling that everybody had, but when he started a second term, it was a completely different feeling. But the MAGA people felt that he had abandoned them. He wasn't loyal. He had moderated, and because I thought they were going to get like kind of Trump conservative type of thing like that. It's like anybody who knew Larry Hogan knew that was not going to be the way he was going to be. That he was going to try to govern down the middle in order to get the greatest effect, because there was no way any legislation was going to get passed that he would propose at all, with those Democrats in control. But he could use executive orders to get a few things around the edges. And that's really what he did. Wes Moore takes over and all hell breaks loose. So, where Maryland is a lot worse off for, not having Larry Hogan in office or any Republican at this stage. I mean, so now we have Dan Cox, running against Wes Moore. Cox, the interesting thing about Cox is just that he's tempered himself. He's not throwing the bombs and the flames, that he did on the first time around. which has actually upset a lot of the people who supported him the first time around, right? So you can't win for losing, right? I mean, there's nothing you can do. You can't make these people happy. I'm much happier with a Dan Cox that is trying to be a more reasonable person, but he probably, it probably gives him less of a chance to win against Moore, just because of the Democrats are going to roll over through this election. I don't see, Moore's going to win re-election and set himself up for 2028, because he knows that field is open. The Democrats have got nothing, at this point. So why not throw your hat in the ring at that point?
Do you think he's viable presidential candidate?
No, absolutely not. But that doesn't, you don't have to be viable to run. Especially if
I hear you, but I mean, I don't see where's he going to get money, because he doesn't seem to get along well with the Democrat legislature in Maryland, and he's got like these big records of failure on stuff that he can't disavow. Like that bridge, is staring you in the face every day. Comes a little from this side, a little from this side, big gap in between. Nothing's been done to address that, right? They're 0% of the way to fixing the bridge. They're 0% closer than the day it happened.
Right. And they don't.
What a failure. I mean, and think about that. When is like, that's when, everybody in the state passes through there at some point, right? Everybody in the state sees that bridge, the big gap in between, so how can you just sit and let that failure stay there like that and not do anything to fix it?
So, and if I'm governor too, and I'm going to run and I win my second term there, is that, I would try to run for something else before the term is over, just because, the purple line is getting closer to completion. And that thing is a disaster. I mean, that's a Hogan started disaster, but Moore has basically been running around the state saying, Moore delivers for you. And the purple line is one of the big things. He's got all these little projects, spending all kinds of money throughout the state saying, we're delivering for you, spending. That's why we have to raise our taxes, right? Because I'm delivering for you, but I have to raise your taxes to pay for what I'm delivering, by the way.
Which you may or may not have needed,
Yeah. And when the purple line is finishing up and running, the amount of money it's going to cost taxpayers is going to be staggering. I wouldn't want to be a politician hanging around, having somebody point out to one of me, is like, you're losing millions and millions of dollars on a project that never should have been started, and one that you could have. It was already in bad shape. You could have found a way to pull the plug or modify it so it just became a smaller project.
He could have pulled the plug a lot of times.
There was opportunities, but with all the cost overruns, with all the contractor issues, there were opportunities to say we're done. They hadn't done much work anyway, so there wasn't a lot of damage. You could kind of get things. You could rebuild or restore something else over there, instead of wiping out all these businesses in Silver Spring and all these things. This is just a disaster, particularly in a post-COVID era where people don't really ride mass transportation. I mean, Montgomery County's, their answer to low transit ridership is to make it free.
Right. Which doesn't help a whole lot. Doesn't
well, actually. It's not, I mean, like, thank you. Okay, so I'm paying for people I don't even know to take these buses around the county.
Right.
I mean, look, and and I drive around the county enough. I mean, it's like there's nobody ever on these buses when I'm driving. Yeah. It's like, so what are we doing now?
Right. That's right.
So you have that, but that also leads into, Moore's now he's touting things, because we know this is a big year for this, right? They're going to put on the ballot, they're going to return the redistricting to the people, so that they can vote on this. So they can amend the state constitution so that the districts don't have to be compact, contiguous, whatever anymore. So that gives the Democrats a chance to just wipe out Andy Harris.
So they're supposed to be contiguous and compact now?
Yeah.
Really?
They're not following the Constitution to begin with.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they're not following how it's supposed to be anyway. I mean, the
Folks,
testimony.
if you're watching this and you don't live in Virginia or Maryland, go look up the Maryland congressional map, districts map.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
ain't compact or contiguous.
yeah, and the Maryland, there've been several people I know were testified in Annapolis about that, and they mentioned these sections of the Maryland Constitution about how the districts should be, how they, they're supposed to be, which already flies in the face of how it goes anyway. But gerrymandering is always gerrymandering. But
it's legal in Maryland to be
yeah,
sheriff. It's
right,
legal,
but
long-standing practice.
Yeah, but they're Democrats obviously want to give themselves a blank check to do everything in their power to wipe out the one last Republican in the state, that's serving there, because we're the Republicans and the Democrats are in a war on redistricting and seats, not just for now, but it will affect everything going forward. So, I have no idea at this point in time how that vote will go, but I would hope that Marylanders would look at that and say, "Come on!" I mean, it's like we're this is just a bridge too far, for this. Is that whatever happened to independent redistricting commissions that would try to do this, where's the idea of letting AI kind of create the districts, and then you can kind of touch them up to make sure, because AI is not, AI has its flaws, but then kind of fix it that way, so that but you have a balanced thing. And it may mean that Maryland will stay 9-1, maybe Maryland goes 8-2, maybe Maryland would go 10-0, but I don't think so, because where Harris is now, it's a very conservative area. So I mean, it would be the ultimate in gerrymandering to get him out at this point in time. They basically pushed him to the last vestiges of where there's a whole group of conservatives in the state of Maryland, left. So
well, I mean, 6. They've already destroyed 6, but
right, they have destroyed 6, and that's what I'm saying. That's they're going to go after Harris to try to destroy that district as well, and it would look ridiculous. There's no doubt it would just absolutely ridiculous to just break that up at this point in time after what they've done elsewhere. So it's just a lot of nonsense that goes on with politics in this sense. But that's the way it is. And as we say, elections have consequences. That you win the races. You control the state house. You get to
do things your way.
Right. You get to do things your way, and if you don't like it, then vote those guys out and try to take over. This has become, on a different scale in Montgomery County with property taxes. It's all of a sudden, I've said this before. I've been next door, watching the activity there, and there has been, I don't think I've seen a subject become such a sore point as property taxes as they have this year in Montgomery County. Part of that is because the county council eliminated the $692 homestead credit kind of thing that they had, that everybody basically got after they applied for it, and virtually everybody applied for it after it had been automatic for a number of years. They made everybody apply for it a few years ago, and then that's with them forever, as long as the county doesn't rescind it, which they did. So they get an automatic tax increase that way. They didn't raise the tax rate, but our assessments were already going up anyway, because we're on a 3-year cycle. So we know that those were going up. So it was, adding insult to injury to see $692 piled up against whatever the assessment increase was, times the tax rate, and say, whoa, what's going on here? And so now you've got all kinds of people, I think on both, I think definitely, based on the fact that how many Republicans are left in the county, there's no doubt in my mind a bunch of these people are Democrats that are complaining too, but they're complaining, oh, we got to vote these guys out and stuff like that. It's like, well, you're the ones who voted them in. I didn't vote for these people. You are now getting what you voted for. So, can we get some Republicans on the county council? It's not going to be this cycle, in all likelihood. But maybe it'll make some of these people think, and realizes that, Montgomery County, just like a lot of other places in the country, liberal Democrats, when they control the levers like this, it's go ahead and let taxes increase your spending, and everybody's going to be just fat and fine with that, and you don't really care if you screw the middle class, because
Right.
they really don't care. They know they're going to win elections, so it's like there's nothing that stops them from raising our taxes, and people are realizing too. I mean, like, Montgomery County is seeing a slight decline in their student enrollment. So then all of a sudden people are like, well, why do the school systems need more money if there are fewer students? Well, you and I talked about this, Brian, too, right? There's a lot of middle management bloat and everything like that. I just saw,
Right.
but we also have nationwide. I mean, the country is now into, a severe birth rate decline, which will lead to fewer students everywhere, just about, in public schools, which means is that there's going to be surplus property. There's going to be more teachers than they need, and and these school districts are loath, with the teachers unions in charge, to lay anybody off, to cut back and do anything else. It's like, oh, just tax them more and they'll pay for it. It's like, yeah, no. It's like, this has got to end somewhere.
Yeah, the ICE is reducing school enrollments too. Yeah, it's like a third of the students in Charlotte aren't there anymore because ICE came. So like, do you lower how much we give the schools of Charlotte by a third? They probably won't, but they should think about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that hasn't really popped up in the discussion so much, in terms of that. Though I did see some people comment on Nextdoor about, get rid of the ICE, portal, in Montgomery County. What are we doing here? Why are we creating all these things with all these expenses if you're pleading poverty and saying we've got to plug this budget gap, and so we're going to have to raise your taxes by eliminating your homestead tax credit, right? And automatically every homeowner in the county gets a tax increase no matter what. So, the county, I mean, these Democrats are very imperious. They just think that they can go ahead and do anything they want and no one's going to complain about it. People are complaining about it, but they just don't know how to fight against it.
Yeah, it's one party rule. You got to put up with however mediocre it gets. It's on you.
Right. It's been such a long time since there's been a Republican in my county. So we've got that. Other things. So Virginia, it's too bad that Youngkin didn't run.
Or Nick Freitas, or any number. There's a couple of others.
Yeah, I mean, what's your take on how you think the state house is it going to change much in the fall?
Well, we don't. We have off-year elections, so
so you're still an off year. That's right. But they didn't. Governor wants to. She wants to align that, though, right? Is that on the ballot? Is that something, or does she have, or can they do? Were they doing that by executive action or just legislative?
She's trying to get it onto the ballot, but she hasn't yet.
Yeah. Okay. So they're trying to do it. So if they do that, it will in the future, it will align with that. So yeah, Republicans hopefully can get their act together in Virginia and take back the state, their state houses. I never hold out any hope for Maryland. So, but we also can look at Michigan, which is just yet another victory for the far left. I think this guy, El-Sayed, I mean, he's rejecting the DSA label, just wants to be a progressive or whatnot. But his ideas are far left. I mean, they align with the DSA. He's got, the people who supported him, Bernie Sanders, AOC, right? He ran against Representative, was it Haley Stevens?
Mm-hmm.
And she had support from Schumer and the establishment. What's happening to the Democratic establishment? I mean, the progressives it's almost like they're chipping away here and there, creating a major.
There's one thing, like New York. New York is, it's a city of immigrants. It's a far left city. It's going to take some weird electoral turns at times. Okay. But this is, the heart of America. And, and yes, this particular state is one where, large Arab population already has some communities that they're predominantly Arab. They're run by Arabs and run by Muslims and whatnot. So, it's not as strange there as it could be other places else, but it's coming. It's like, it's not, it's what he's saying is not really on the outskirts of the party anymore. We used to think that it was, but I mean, they're talking about, there's a guy is like he's an admirer of Hassan Piker, the, virulent left racist guy. He's a dedicated anti-Semite. He is, there's some question about whether he's a doctor. He claims to be an MD, and there's some questions about his credentials and so forth. He is far left. Cut down police, eliminate ICE, eliminate the military, eliminate the Senate, the White House, and the Supreme Court. Subsume everything to the House of Representatives. Just have a 600-member House, and that's how we run the country. Could you imagine what that would be like? 600 people, whatever they come up with. Oh my gosh, right? So, I mean, these people, it's like they're not just a little off the edge. They're a way off the edge. So, I don't know. And I think that there's debate now. Is this a gift or a curse? Is this energy carryover? I think the people of Michigan can still tell crazy from not crazy, and I think that they're not going to want to be associated with a guy with a virulent racist past, Republican or Democrat. And Mike Rogers, the Republican candidate, he's not quite Larry Hogan, but he's a really moderate Republican. So they're not asking you to vote for a far right winger or Trump supporter or whatever. He's just a kind of a mainline Republican. The other thing is, like, MAGA is not, it was thought of as like a far right thing, right? But that's the middle now. I mean, they're for the middle things, and there are people to the right of them, and there are people to the left of them, and those numbers are kind of balancing, which tells you that they're kind of the middle. So, when the right, you get the criticism from like the libertarians and so forth, it's like, you're too far, you're too far to the edge. You don't see the middle anymore. Right. And if we have to govern from the middle, that's what it is now. It's changed. It's not where it was before.
Yeah. I mean, Rogers is a long time Michigander. I mean, he's a known,
right.
He's a known
served in
father.
Congress, served in intelligence.
Yeah.
roles,
I mean, you can look at his voting record and everything like that. He's a sensible candidate. El-Sayed, I mean, he won, but it's a narrow victory. I'll be curious to see, maybe you've already heard that, whether or not, how many Democrats will actually, mainstream Democrats will actually endorse him. The thing about a lot of these left-wing candidates, these DSA types and whatnot, is just, with their crazy, platforms and, thought ideas and things like that, how the Democrats, how a lot of the mainstream Democrats, they won't disavow them. They don't want them there, but they won't disavow them, at the same time either. I mean, they are doing a political calculus saying that, if we disavow them, then we might lose that seat, and we need that seat. Every seat counts. On the other hand, we're inviting trouble by if we do invite more of those into the party, they will change the face of the Democratic Party, and not for the good. I think there was a time where you could tell much more easily the difference between a Republican and a Democrat. That is not the case really much anymore, because you're talking about MAGA, and how MAGA has kind of been changing over time. But the Democrats, they had a mix. They had the blue dog Democrats, and they had all kinds of. They had some really, blue dogs are pretty much gone, and then
they had some like hardcore, guys who were there for highway appropriations, defense appropriations, not wildly ideological, right? Just, the basics of government, like get our, get some for our people, type of people, and they're all gone. And it's down to ideologues. It's down to what we would call hacks.
Yeah, I mean, Republicans had a lot of good people serving in Congress that worked on a lot of legislation over the years that tried to keep us in line, especially on fiscal policy and things like that, trying to keep us from spending too much money, which is pretty hard to do in Washington. But at least, they were trying to hold the line on that, and yeah, I think, we've turned into, a Congress and a Senate of more ideologues and and the decorum. I mean, if there, the Senate was known or at least thought to be, a chamber where there was a lot of decorum, but at that Fauci hearing when Moreno dropped the F-bomb, I'm like, okay. To me, I think that's a direct result of Donald Trump, because Trump is now he's been using language like this all over the place, and so it's kind of like all bets are off onto what you're going to hear in any hearing from now on by any side. They're getting down into the mud, and it is just becoming these ideologues fighting against each other, staking their position and saying, okay, here we go, and if they'll call a spade, even if it means dropping these F-bombs, at a public hearing and whatnot.
The history of strong rhetoric in the Senate is more prevalent. I mean, we look back at it now and you say, okay, it wasn't so bad before. Yeah, it was. It's been pretty bitter. You had people shot on the Senate floor. No one's tried to shoot anybody over there in a long time. No one's tried to actually have a fist fight with anybody over there in a long time. Right? It's just words now. So, I don't know that we're any more bitter to the other side than when we were before, but the rhetorical tools at our disposal have changed. Obviously, there's the internet and there's, social media and so forth. And there's also, I thought about that when I was watching when Bernie Moreno did that. And I thought, I understand that, like, okay, what was he trying to do there? He's trying to get people's attention onto the issue, right? And to really frame it in a way that, that you could see that it was Fauci who had acted incorrectly or whatever. But, I wouldn't have done that, like I coach these basketball games and I get it, get in it with refs. Sometimes you get it with parents. Sometimes you get it with players. We don't ever use any cuss. We never curse. My daughter, she coaches with me. She doesn't do it either. There's no curse words, right? Because, it's like you say, it's a level of decorum, like we can argue vigorously, but we're not going to that, right? You're not going to be able to claim that I did that because I don't do it. And, people come to know these things about you, right? And so, he didn't slip up. It looks like he planned for that moment, right? It's like, I'm going to get a chance and I'm going to tell my little story about how, I gave up all my businesses and decided to get in here so I could sit here in this chair and ask you this question. Well, I mean, okay, you tell me that story, then you say, who are you to have done this, right? Would that have been less effective? I don't really think so. I think the story would have had, equal weight and would have been equal ferocity and effectiveness in terms of changing opinion without that, maybe even more, right? Because what are we talking about? We're not talking about the substance of what he said and how did Fauci do these things, right? We're talking about that word, right? 2 weeks later, what's the conversation? That word. So, you got your word into the record, and we all know that you alone are really mad about this, But so what, right? You made it crass and you didn't really accomplish anything. And I'm a Bernie fan. I think he's a good senator, but I didn't go for that either.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, what do I remember from the exchange? I remember the F-bomb dropping. I don't, the other stuff that he was doing is lost.
You stop considering whether his point is right. Is he right that, the unction of Fauci should be the issue? The audacity to do what he did should be the issue. Yeah, quite possibly. But, the issue is now F-bomb.
Yeah. And because of social media, you know, we've turned these guys, these our representatives or senators, into people who are also into performative art. They know that
Right.
there's watching. They know that that stuff can be, can be clipped and done. Memes can be made and whatever not. So they're calculating in their head too, what will
Yeah.
have an impact that way. So yeah, that kind of thing. I didn't check to see whether or not the F-bomb kind of a thing, got a lot of carriage through all of social media, Instagram and Twitter and everything like that. But, you do this for effect because you can do that now, but you lose the purpose of what you're doing. The stuff that you were really trying to accomplish gets lost because you're now trying to perform to the camera and not really hone in on your issue and the statements you were trying to make. It's too bad. Yeah, I mean, I think Moreno's a good guy, but I think to me it's a mistake to go and do that. Anyway, we got to keep moving along. The other thing too is that I see that Representative Edwards from North Carolina is not going to run for re-election. Uh, he was facing a potential censure. Whether or not how much of this stuff was accurate or not, I don't know. But I'm just kind of curious as to I didn't see what the next step was for North Carolina to replace him in the primary. After the primary, he's won the primary. The general election, whether or not the next guy gets up, or they have to do something else. So they have a candidate in there to run in the fall. I don't know. Do you know anything about that at this point?
I don't know what their procedure is. Um, but if it's Republicans, they're going to ask for some kind of election, right?
Yeah.
They're going to try to shoehorn some kind of vote in there, right? Like we did yesterday.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, what I didn't see what kind of district he had, whether or not he was R plus something or other. Is it a comfortable R district or?
It's a comfortable R district, so they just got to get somebody who's not offensive. But.
Okay, so that's at least the chances are is that it'll still be a safe district. You don't want to see that if you're like +1 or +2.
Right, that's right.
At this point, because there are going to be some tight races in the fall as they have been.
Like speaking of which, is like Wisconsin governor. They've had to move that from leans Democrat to leans Republican because this Hong woman,
she's a disaster
with the whiteness of her son.
Yeah, she's a complete disaster for them. I mean, they're apoplectic. I mean, they've got a primary. They've got this thing coming up here this month, I guess. And this is not good. I mean, the incumbent governor is like, the Democratic Party is having a real big problem, with this. It's a great opportunity for the Republicans because, when Republicans know what happens when you put up a loony candidate. You can pay a heavy price for that, and
That's right.
This looks like a really good opportunity for Wisconsin Republicans at this point. I do want to say too that I'm hoping that this is the last that we'll hear of Cori Bush.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she'll go off to do St. Louis things.
Yeah. I mean, look, she could be another Stacey Abrams, right, or whatever. They try to form something that turns out to be corrupt and inept, and then you wind up having your reputation gets torn to shreds.
But what happens to her is it's kind of like what happened to Trump when he came to Washington his first term. It's like Cori Bush doesn't know anybody who knows how to run a congressional office in Washington, right? She wins an election. She has some strong ideas about stuff, but she doesn't know anything about like what does it actually take to serve as a member of Congress. And so she ends up hiring people that it ends up being a mix of loyalists and people who don't know what they're doing, right? And one of those two is almost always going to get you in trouble.
Wasn't it family members involved?
The family members.
Yeah,
like nephew or cousin or something was her security guy and owned a security company and ended up with a bunch of millions of government dollars somehow. So.
Yeah, she's a really good example of like, oh look, I got elected. I'm going to get paid this money, and I've got this budget. So let's go ahead and just spread it around, and we're going to have this little mafia going on here, and we're just going to suck the government dry with a bunch of inept people.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and then and she aligned herself with the squad too, right? So
Yeah.
that's one squad member that was not one of their bright and shining moments. Not that anybody is particularly noteworthy, except AOC continues to roll along and show that she's got stamina and she's definitely a force to be dealt with. I think in a lot of cases. Uh, Other things we need to go over real quickly too. So the Iran war still going on here. A lot of negotiations apparently about the Strait of Hormuz. Um, I want to just mention this only in the sense of the stock market was very high on the possibility that we're really going to get more oil flowing through the strait. And so it's taken off like a rocket here in the last couple of days, and hoping that and oil prices are down about $10 a barrel since last week, since we were here last week. So that's good news. Trump, though, to me, I love Trump going out there and kind of badgering the oil companies because I'm like, wait a minute, it's like he sounds like a Democrat.
Yeah, a lot of people, like a lot of the libertarians are like, he told them to lower the prices. Like, well, he didn't make them lower the prices. He jawboned them, right?
Yeah,
and I want my president out telling those guys lower the prices. Like, what is the downside of that? Oh, well,
yeah,
they felt pressure. I want them to feel pressure. That's what it's all about.
Well, look, I think it's rather funny or maybe a little bit hypocritical because they made all this money thanks to the war that he started. He going in there that basically tightened up supply to the point where they're minting money. Now, as supply and demand start to even out, those profits are going to go down. I mean, they will still make money, but those profits are abnormally high right now. They will get back to a more normal level, once this is settled. Because I was there, I think the guy from the American Petroleum Institute said that about 7% of the oil that we need or whatever, is going through the strait right now. So if they open it up, things change dramatically. So, we've got, and you or I don't like paying $4 a gallon for gas when we're paying a little over 3 or less than 3 last year. You did enjoy your sub 3 gas, I guess, in Texas, but you also paid the $5 or $6 in California or whatever.
Yeah, $6.50 or whatever California.
Yeah.
I remember I think we had $118 tank somewhere. Yeah, 118 tank. And it's all the way the whole East Coast. I mean, Oregon's a little better, but Washington's as bad as California.
Yeah. No, it's not good there. I mean, I didn't even check with my son to see what it was like in Utah because Utah is also, it's not as high as California, but even though they've got some refineries in there, it's usually higher than it is here, for some reason. And it depends on where the pipelines are and where the flow is, and so many factors that go into that. But hopefully those things will, as we get closer to the election, will smooth that out. So as we get down towards the end here, so Todd Blanche, his nomination moved forward out of committee once he basically satisfied Tillis and Cornyn about the anti-weaponization fund, which I'm glad it's not an issue. I put that behind us.
I think people should start suing them for wrongful imprisonment and all that kind of stuff in there.
Look, they can go ahead and do that. That's fine.
Do that.
I don't. We didn't need them for it. Need the fund. The whole way it was set up.
I thought the fund was a cheap way to deal with that, because you do owe them some compensation. They were mistreated by the government on purpose. So
I mean, if you were and you felt you were and you want to sue the government, go sue the government and prove that it happened, and then see what happens. But just to have this anti-weaponization fund, which was the control over it was kind of sketchy, which looked like it was just a way to funnel all this money to all these people without any direct proof. I mean, they could have probably provided the minimum amount of proof and they would have gotten a check for something. So go prove it in a court of law and let it happen. And that's fine. If the government has to cough up the money, let them cough up the money, but move on from that. So I don't know. I mean, we do have the majority in the Senate, but I don't know if that means is that, is he going to get confirmed, or is it just going to be one of those things that's going to be just a close one?
I think those 2 votes give it to him. he'll either gets him to 50 and Vance can cast a tiebreaker or gets him to 51. I think that
I wouldn't be
two votes
surprised.
meant he would
I wouldn't be
pass.
surprised if Vance has to cast a tiebreaker in this case in order to get him over the hump.
But the thing about it is that's big news, because there's a ton of stuff we found out when they were trying to charge Comey the first time, that you have to have a confirmed attorney general to do. So once he's confirmed, like, you could start seeing, whatever they have in Fort Pierce come out, right? And, whatever you're going to do with Brennan and Clapper and all those guys could start coming out, right? Which, if that doesn't come out pretty soon, it's useless, right? You're literally down to a month at most. Those indictments need to drop if they're ever going to drop. I suspect it's getting into Durham report, Horowitz report territory, where it's a smoking gun. We got you guys. It's coming, and doesn't really show up.
Yeah, look, if there are legitimate reasons to go after people, go after them. I just don't want Trump, who complained about lawfare, to go and use lawfare against others.
That's right. So they got to be careful about it. But they've had this stuff a long time. They've had a lot of evidence for a long time, and nothing's come of it. So it's beginning to look like they've got DeGenova down there running this. He broke it all apart, reorganized it, and how they were going about it and everything. But if it doesn't happen soon, then it's not going to happen, right? Then it need not. It won't matter if it does happen. Right, but my suspicion is that they fell short. Then they already know it, and they're figured out how to break the news.
Yeah. So once Blanche gets in, which we're giving him a good shot of getting in, even if it is a tiebreaker, then we'll kind of see. They'll sort it out and see what is worth pursuing and not, and just kind of move forward. Now, Jeannine Pirro apparently is a little bit in the hot seat there over the whole reflecting pool thing. Look. AIM gave an award to Jeannine Pirro back in the day, and I always thought she was always a tough character, right? She was, on Fox, she was something else and all that kind of stuff like that. And there's no doubt that I think she really wanted to do Trump's bidding, and make this thing happen. The reflecting pool thing did not work out the way that Trump had hoped it would, and they still can fix it and get it right. And all of this. This was a major undertaking that they really sped through, and problems developed. But you gotta love how Trump is kind of like, now he's just like, he's not happy with her.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the media. I don't think there's that big a rift here. And also,
but he said he's not happy with her.
But I'm not sure that he's not right. It is assumed, well, they found out this and that. Like, that's one side. That's one side of the story. Why does Trump still think this guy is guilty? No one asked that question, right? We don't know the answer to that question, right? It may be because he's guilty, right? It's not, we just assume, oh, well, Trump must have been lying and overstating the case. You have no evidence of that. We don't know that. It could be the guy cut the thing just like Trump said.
I think that the idea that this guy had some real sabotage is pretty minuscule. I
don't think it's minuscule at all.
So you and I are going to. I tend to think that this project was rushed. It was basically a no bid deal. There were other problems that the reflecting pool had forever, and they really should have taken this on. I understand why he wanted to do this, because we had July 4th, 250th birthday. He really wanted to do this the Trump way. No problem with that, but really
it had to be fixed.
That process should have started when he took office, and they should have had more time to work on that, bid that out, and find the right thing to do and test that out, because the reflecting pool is just kind of a weird thing about where it draws water and all this stuff. The temperatures in D.C. create issues. So, there are multiple number of issues that were there.
Decades of not keeping it up hurt it too.
Yeah, right. No, there's been neglect. There's all kinds of stuff. I'm glad that he has gone after that to try to fix it. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he wants to do something at Dulles Airport and really turn that into a state-of-the-art place. Though I did read the other day, there will be one potential downside to passengers once this is all done, if it actually gets done, is that it apparently costs $10. The airlines pay $10 per passenger every time somebody flies out of Dulles. In order to pay for that $22 billion project at Dulles, that fee would go up to $90 per passenger every time you leave. So I'm like, that's called a
Adds
deplanement fee.
$80 to your price of your ticket. Yeah.
Right. So think about it. Now, this is going to be over the course of years. I mean, this is not something that's going to happen next year, right? And they've got to go through process. But I may not even be alive by that time. Who knows? What the heck? Government projects. I mean, he's already changed his mind on now what he wants to do with Union Station, because that sucker's an albatross.
Yeah.
But I do like what Trump has been trying to beautify America, get some of our iconic, buildings and things like that up to snuff. I mean, Union Station has been an embarrassment for over 50 years.
You don't see. I went through town the other day, and it was, there's none of those tents anymore. All that stuff has been cleaned out, right?
Yeah,
which is not. It's not a place you should be allowed to camp. You go camp somewhere else.
And he's putting gold leaf on statues,
where he's making he's sprucing it up, making it more secure, has people out watching the street so you don't get mugged. I mean, that's people don't realize what a big difference that he has made for DC.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think of him as somebody interested in upgrading DC.
Yeah, I don't know, but and he's doing it all in his signature gold.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a gold city with President Trump. All right, I'm going to keep trying to run through this. So I got a bunch of those MAGA exiles. They're meeting. They want to form another party. That's going to go absolutely nowhere. These people are a bunch of losers.
Yes, basically. So I mean, I think that the proxy for this party to what is it capable of achieving is probably about what Ron DeSantis had in the 2024 campaign, about 9, 10, 11% of the vote. And, that's it of Republican vote, right? Of 2 or 3 or 4% of overall vote. But, they're a non-factor. They lost every primary to Trump by 40 points. And it's the same people, that they're like the Democrats. It's not really, except for the really outlandish things that they say, it's kind of hard to tell what they're for, right? Because they're just against everything. They're just against everything Trump does. They're like, we believed and now we don't believe. It's like, we figured it out. It's like, you didn't figure out. You had things you were frustrated about, and you're making mountains out of molehills, and that's fine. You can do that, but you're consigning yourself to irrelevancy forever.
Well, the thing to me too is just that, I mean, to me, this is really built on their anti-MAGA feelings, right?
Yeah.
When Trump
leaves office, like the libertarians, they've gone to the left.
Yeah. When Trump leaves office, MAGA will not be the same. I mean, they'll still be around, but it'll be a different type of group. And as you've already said before, it's already kind of changing now, while Trump is in office. So you're targeting a group that is changing, that you may not actually disagree with as much. You're just bitter about Trump. So
right.
You're behind the curve already. I mean, by the time you try to establish this and actually find a candidate, your candidate won't be any different than the Republican candidate. Man, I mean,
and people don't realize it's like, the idea that like anything Trump is terrible and poison is dying. It's not dead, but it's dying. And the way, the way I know is like this morning, I was looking at a golf, something on Facebook about, it's like a golf group or whatever, right? They talk about golf. And the lead story of it was, I think in the 2028 tour, the PGA tour here in the US, they're going to go back to playing at Doral. They're going to have an event at Doral, which Trump owns now. And the one guy went, oh, hell no, right? And everybody else is like, what's wrong with you? He just got completely obliterated. It's a good golf course. It doesn't matter that Trump owns it, right? And some people really like Trump, but some people are like, why worry about that aspect of this? This is golfers playing a golf course. It doesn't have to do with politics or Trump or any of that.
Play your golf at the best golf courses.
Yeah, right. And don't worry about who owns them and all that stuff, because that doesn't matter to you. So the idea that it's just poison and radioactive to touch anything Trump is dying, right? It's like, even the people that don't like him are like, he's just another president. He's just a president I don't like. Okay. And that's a different rational way. And I would argue probably a better way to go about beating him if you want to beat him, because when people start telling me about, the Epstein files and, he's a pedo and all this, it's like, okay, you're not really paying attention, and no actual dialogue is going to help you, because, you don't have any knowledge. You don't know what's going on, right? You don't have any idea what you're talking about. So, you're finally getting to the point where there's a critical mass of people who, just, they don't feel that threatened by it anymore.
Yeah. Look,
they're tuning that out.
To you anti-MAGA, never Trumpers, out there. And it's like, who thought, America was going to just fall apart or go down the drain. America is fine. We're thriving. We're fine. There are things that I personally do not care for that Trump has done, but I don't agree with every president anyway. And most people never agree with everything a president does to begin with. But here we are a year and a half into his term, his final term, and we're fine. And we're going to be fine. By the time, the election rolls around, for whoever is going to run, we're going to be fine. And
I remember, I don't know if you remember this. We had a conversation about this when Biden was president, right? And one of the things we said was like, I had been somewhere and I was like, I'm driving up down the highway and there's, zillions of cars going past me, and we're going through, I think I'd been in California, unlimited, wealthy, stopping by that places, right? And it's like, yeah, the economy's in bad shape and it's being mismanaged and the people running the country don't know what they're doing, but this is America, and for the most part, those guys really can't ruin what we're doing, right? And for the most part, it's fine, right? There's things that need to be fixed, but for the most part, we're fine, and we're always going to be fine, because you can't really dig, you can't really unearth this American. And these people talking about eliminating the presidency, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. We're not going to do that for you, right? You're the one who's going to have to change. You're going to have to learn to work with those institutions, right? I mean, that's not going to be a thing. So. I think it's good. I think that, I think we need to understand that, we are arguing about important things, right? And there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And there are threats that we need to be addressing as a society. But for the most part, America is fine. Americans are fine. It's going to be okay.
That's right. We're going to be fine because we are the United States of America.
That's right.
We are, we
figured it out.
That's right. All right, quickly, as I'm going to run through this. So I threw this on there. This means nothing to you, but I only threw this on there. So my daughter-in-law was on a 6-week study abroad program through the UK. So they started in Scotland. We went through London, Wales, London, Ireland, and then she's finally home. But so a year ago when she was in Japan finishing up her English teaching assignment, she dropped a piece of luggage on her foot the day before she left, and so she was actually in a wheelchair. She had to leave a piece of luggage behind. She accompanied us back to Japan this year so she could get her luggage. Partly, it's a very expensive trip to go get a piece of luggage, I'll tell you that.
I agree.
But so that was that. This year she gets, so it's what, 42 days supposed to be roughly, right? On like day 40 or 41, while she's on one of these little tours that they have as part of their classes, she misses a step and sprains her ankle. Okay.
Oh no, same foot.
May have been the same foot. I didn't even ask the same foot, but all of a sudden a picture starts appearing. She got this little private blog, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And she's like, she's in an ambulance or some kind of medical care thing. And so they were at some kind of little festival thing. And so they had one of those medical tents, and I guess that's where she was. And then they transported her to the A&E. So the accident and emergency, as it's called in the UK. She said she was a little nervous about it at first because of the money, but it's free because it's socialized medicine, right? So she's like, oh, fine, okay, I'll go. So she's there. She's there for 5 hours, and they never took. They said, well, we got to check this out, and then we want to take your MRI, and they never got around to her in 5 hours. And she and one of the other classmates said, we're just going to find a taxi or take an Uber because this is ridiculous. One of the nurses or people who work over at the A&E says, oh, this is nothing. He says, people often spend 10 hours here.
Right. I saw that the wait time to get an appointment in Canada now is like 29 days.
Yeah. So, we see stories about this all the time. I now have a personal story from my daughter-in-law who was in an A&E, spent 5 hours, and basically got 0.
Yeah, that's right.
Unbelievable, that's happened. So, she just had to wrap her ankle in ice to the best that she could. And, she managed to make it home and everything like that. I don't think she had to leave any luggage behind this time. So, which is good because I am not paying for her trip back to London or wherever to go get any more luggage is coming up. Just my real brief commentary. So, we have we talked about Sophie Cunningham and the whole stuff that she's been doing to fight about girls, no transgender in girls sports, became a big thing. So then you had Cheryl Reeve, the coach of the Lynx, wearing a trans girls belong shirt or whatever it was, specifically when the Fever played the Lynx, right? Right. Definitely a pointed attack at Sophie Cunningham. I really hate the I mean, I was never a big fan of the WNBA, but I really thought that the Caitlin Clarks and there were some good players out there, Paige Beckers, all these people, right, out there that had lit up the college scene, gone to the pros. Attendance is way up, interest is way up. They're getting contracts, they're getting paid more. They're starting to get more traction. But this is a terrible thing. This is not this whole politicking thing. Get it out of here. I mean, Sophie, I think Cunningham was just trying to make a point that she just thinks, she's trying to protect young girls and all this stuff. And then you've got this.
Yeah. Why is a coach like think about an NBA coach comes out with a shirt like that, right? What would the NBA do? They would say that's not a place for this kind of shirt, right? Don't do this again, right? And they've got on to Steve Kerr, right, for being overly political, and Popovich, and those were being over political for the left, right? They're both screaming leftists, both of them. Which I think is interesting because I've obviously met a lot of basketball coaches in my life, and I bet they're 90% are conservative because it's an accountability business, and this
on Pop and on Kerr, it's not like they're wearing these T-shirts at the games.
Well, Kerr did. He had some T-shirt over his shirt, and he got in trouble for it, right? By blasting Trump or something, but I'm not a shut up and dribble guy. These people, they have a right. But the thing about it is like the microphone you're using, right? Ronald Reagan made I paid for the microphone. The person who paid for the microphone gets to say how the microphone is used. You want to get your own microphone, you can say whatever you want. So the league is allowing her to do this, to set up this controversy. And what else happened there was a protest, right? Outside, there was the pro Sophie Cunningham people and the anti-Sophie Cunningham. And it seems like the whole league and the coaches remarked when they asked her about it, she goes, well, I just think, sports should include everyone. That's not the question, right? The question is, should men be able to play in women's sports? I mean, if there's a league of transvestites, okay, that's fine. I have no problem with that. That's what they want to do. Go have that league. I'd coach it, That's a pretty crazy people. It could be a whole lot worse. But it's you don't have the right to do that, right? You don't have the right to play in the WNBA, right? You have to be selected, and there are criteria for getting selected, and one of them is you got to be a woman. And if they apparently, actually, that's not true. Apparently, the league is saying that there's a trans player in France, 6'8" guy, who wants to come over and play in the WNBA, and the league has said they have no rules against it. So, and he's a big dude too. He's not skinny at all. He's a big, strong guy. So, I'm like, bring it on. Come get in the league and play against these women and show the deal, right? To make people understand why they don't let men in the women's sports, or they shouldn't be in women's sports, right? Because it's a big physical advantage. It's not the same game, right? So I don't understand the problem with it. But the league seems to think it can sell more tickets stoking this controversy than solving it or addressing it in any responsible way. And I don't understand that. And I'd like to see why they think that. And I'd like to see whether that's true. So, I don't know. But the end result is, the traditional sports fan like me and you, who you say what we want. We're on the weekend. We're watching them games. We're flipping between channels and catching the end of this one and the start of that one and all that stuff. We're not doing that for the WNBA because it looks like a league where they don't, they let thugs beat up the stars, for some kind of racial reason, and where they promote boys and girls sports. And it's like, I want to be down for that league. I'm coaching girls, right? So that they can go up the path and get into these leagues. But I'm not down with this. I can't go with this.
Yeah. And then Ed Markey he was on the floor, Senate floor, and talking about there's only 12 transgenders in the NCAA. We have to protect them, so everybody needs to be able to play. You
play in the boys. You can play.
Yeah. Well, look, it's not quite the same apples to apples comparison, but you remember, we had that whole boycott of the 1980 Olympics or thereabouts. Right. What did Ted Turner do? He formed the Goodwill Games. All right. It's like, okay, yeah. I'm just going to put these other countries. We're going to have another set of games that'll be like the Olympics with those teams. It's like, fine, do that. Yeah. You can go ahead and do that. So yeah, I mean, this is the WNBA. I mean, if you want to lose support for things, this is one way of doing it. I mean, but I don't know. They're just. I guess it's kind of like what we said last week was what Brian Urlacher said. We know the league is gay.
So, yeah, but what we know is there are a lot of disparate forces jerking the league in various directions, and whoever's the lady in charge is completely inept, and I think that she got to go.
All right, a couple more things as we continue to roll along here. It's going longer than I want to do, but anyway, it's a good discussion. So this is just something I noticed, and maybe you already knew about it, but I had no idea. So we've had this DC Open, tennis match going on every summer for something like 40 plus years, right? Yeah. And it was like the Leg Mason Classic, and I think Citibank sponsored it.
Right.
And then I saw the TV the other day when I was at the gym. I was leaving, and they were doing a report on it because it's going on right now. And the screen the gym didn't have the screen size correctly, so it just said like Mubadala D.C Open, and I'm like, I know there's more to that, so I looked it up, and I'm like, it says Mubadala D.C Open. I'm like, what the heck is that? So it's Abu Dhabi's public investment fund. So they've been sponsoring this thing for 4 years. I had no clue. It's like, this is kind of interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about this, but it's their money. I mean,
it's their money, and it's a tennis tournament, and I think.
And I don't pay a lot of attention to tennis, but I just thought, do a lot of other people actually? It's a small tournament, so not a lot of people pay attention to it. But do people understand? It's like, by the way, the Abu Dhabi's come in and they decided to sponsor a tennis tournament. Hello.
Yeah.
I just think it's kind of, I mean, after all the fuss about live golf and everything like that, and and all, so it's just kind of interesting to see. It's like, there's money coming in from other sources. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it reminds me of the old days when the American university basketball teams played in the Adnan Khashoggi Center.
Oh yeah, that's right. The Khashoggi Center. That's right. I remember.
That's right. And then Adnan's source of income came to light, and then it was Bender Arena, and so.
Yeah, there's more stories like that out there.
You know, Bad Man is the uncle of Jamal.
Oh,
Did
is
you
that
know that?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that explains what happened to Jamal.
Could be. All right, and last, this goes into the home territory of Brian. Astros on a roll. Mariners are kind of struggling, so it's got the husband-wife dynamic here.
Yeah, yeah. So she's actually been really good because you know they've Astros have won, I think, 14 out of 16 now, or 15 out of 17. So they've come from like the best team in baseball since May the 20th. They've come from something like 19 and 32 to now they're 4 games over and leading the division. And you know the Mariners were hanging with us until the last week or so. They've had a rough period of time, and the Mariners were kind of semi-sellers at the deadline. And you know we were more we didn't make a lot of acquisitions, but I mean you win 15 out of 17, you can make the argument that you don't need a whole lot, right? So and the Astros were committed to not overpay it. I think the interesting thing was this year was the trade deadline was the economics of it. Like there were some teams that you know like the Red Sox traded 3 of their best 5 prospects for the Orioles backup catcher, right? He's number 1 overall, and he's been an all-star 4 times, Rutschman. But you know, you mortgaged your future for a guy who had lost his job, right? Who had been beaten out of his job as starting catcher of the Orioles. So you know, there were a lot of the overpays like that, and you know, and then you take the Dodgers, but they didn't really overpay, right? They underpaid. A lot of people say for Tarek Skubal, that was probably the biggest trade of the deadline. So, you know, the teams, the sellers, they wanted prospects, they want the future, right? We were trying to get a one major league guy to do a certain thing, and you know, teams like the Astros started saying paying a big price in prospects may not be worth it. It may be better to just stick with what we have than you keep mortgage in the future because you know the rosters change so much, and also I wonder how much the dynamic of the possibility of a strike next year, you know, people didn't want to take on big contracts. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean
that might have
the
been how,
overhang. Yeah,
that might be
I
how
mean,
Scooble got to the Dodgers is like whoever's, you know, he's going to be on strike and he won't be making money. But I mean, when you come out of that strike, you're going to owe him huge money, whether you can win with him or not. And, you know, the other people didn't want to do that. So,
yeah, if there's a strike, a labor walkout, basically, it does there's definitely a calculus in the back of the GMs or the baseball ops people's minds about that. They don't want these big contracts, you know, sitting on their books. The ones they sign now, they don't want to sign people to big deals now, knowing that that's a distinct possibility. So,
right.
2027 could be an interesting year in baseball overall. But yeah, I mean, if you're correct, if the Astros were 19 and 32, that's shades of the Nationals at 19 and 31 and winning the World Series.
Right. That's right.
So you never know. You never know.
That's right.
But in the American League, it's just generally terrible this year. So
Exactly right.
Anybody can win the pennant in the American League. It's a question of
Yeah.
whether or not you can beat the Dodgers
That's right.
in the National League. So
that's right.
All right. We are now at the end. It is now time for the MRC Minute if you've got something.
Well, my thing was like, the one of the things they've been tracking is the coverage of Graham Plattner in Maine and El-Sayed in Michigan, and how like there's doubt about whether he's a doctor, and there's all his anti-Semitic statements he's made. El-Sayed, I'm talking about friendship with Hassan Piker and all this stuff that has been blacked out of the media. So, the right-leaning media produced 120 stories about this. The news apps on your phone didn't put any of them on the front page, right? Because they don't want this stuff to get out. So the way, the media's big playbook in these things is to just hide the bad news, right? Just don't let it see the light of day. And so they're being, the news is out there. There's enough good right-wing outlets now cranking out stuff, and it's reliable. It's, you know, they're not worried about the facts being wrong. They know the facts are right. That's why they're doing what they're doing. So, but you know, the big story is that like that and the Fauci, like they just hide the bad and emphasize the stuff they think favors them. And it's like it's a new form of censorship that may be more effective than all the forms before it.
All right, that's it, folks. Thank you for joining us for this, maybe the longest one we've had ever.
Yeah.
But I think it was a good discussion. Hope you enjoyed that. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise, especially the Democratic Socialists of America. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again next week.